You are listening to let us begin again. You are listening to WXRWLP Milwaukee on 104.1 FM and on River West Radio everywhere. Now you can also listen by telling your smart speaker to play River West Radio. Support for this program comes from Collectivo Coffee and Troubadour Bakery, makers of artisan bread and scratched baked goodies. Visitors to Collectivo's Bayview Cafe can look in on Troubadour Bakers as they prepare breads and cafe favorites daily. More info is at collectivocoffee.com. This is Cinema Fireside, and thank you all for listening in, and thank you, Gabe, for calling in most certainly. If you're listening live, it is a beautiful evening in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and a slight breeze pushes the evergreen, very tall evergreen across the street back and forth in a most wondrous fashion. And if you look down Center Street to your west, you'll see the blaze of a falling sun as night begins to overpower the realm of twilight. It's beautiful out there. It's a nice day for sure. I hope everyone's well and everyone's good. We took the week off last week, and there was the Academy Awards. I've seen about for 30 years straight, at least, for without missing a beat, I think since at least 1988. Didn't plan for it. It just happened. Thank you, listeners, for listening in. You know, each week there's a different psychology, and I'm doing good. Sarah Lou's here. Martin's here. The man with the hat is here. I said, Mister, I like the way you wear that hat. So we're off to a decent start, and there was some pretty good film watching, including North by Northwest on 35 millimeter. Had a team of colleagues with, so that was a fun experience. It was well intended by a general audience. Immediately there was a business call to one of them, and they booked out. I was like, oh, what's that? But no, it had to be done. It had to be done. It was an interesting way to start the proceedings for sure. But a great screening of North by Northwest. I've got a couple books on it, including the script and critical examinations of the film, so that's always fun to dig into. North by Northwest is not based on any source material. Usually Hitchcock predominantly bases his work on stage plays, on short stories, on novels. An example, Rope's a play. Dial M for Murder is a play by Frederick Knott. Psycho is obviously based on a novel by Robert Bloch. The Birds is based on a short story by Daphne du Maurier, as well as Rebecca. She wrote that novel, and so on and so forth. If you haven't seen Jamaica Inn, this is before Hitchcock gets too American, is under the sway of David O. Selznick. Actually, Hitchcock's first American film is 1940's Rebecca, which won Best Picture. But prior to that, still in England, he did a cozy called Jamaica Inn, and that's pretty cool as well. Hitchcock has, I don't know, he's about 53 films. I've seen them all. I've never counted. 53, 54 from the first existing silent, not the Mountain Eagle, because they can't find that. That's all of his films in extant have been seen up to the Potty Mouth family plot from 76. I mean, there is definitely a falling off after Marnie. I never got into Marnie until I started getting into it, because sometimes when you have no emotional connection to a film and it just seems it can't get worse, I don't mean that really in a pejorative way, but what I'm saying is some films you get really taken by, and then their emotional and psychological impact diminishes upon repeated viewings. But there's some films that you never dug from the start, so there's no harm in seeing them again, and slowly they kind of rise up, with further viewings. And that's kind of like with Marnie. There's I've seen that 2 or 3 times, and there's something interesting about it. Definitely, my favorite Hitchcock films. Number one by far is North by Northwest, which is interesting. Again, no source material, and it's him, Hitchcock, and Ernest Lehman, the screenwriter, essentially hanging out and just discussing, disparate ideas and putting them all together until you have that 136-minute wonder from 1959, because Vertigo is 58 and Psycho is 60, Birds is 63. So yeah, great viewing of North by Northwest. I've seen that many times on many screens throughout my lifetime. Then, further on, Memories of Underdevelopment. I've known about this film in my many perusals through film history books, film theory books, so on and so forth, and it was a film that to see sometime, somewhere. I saw it up on the big screen, and it is the best, for me, film I've seen in 7 years that was new to me. It's 1968's Memories of Underdevelopment. To me, it is what I get into film. It's women, it's art, it's books, it's sculpture, it's aesthetic cinema. It takes place in a very political milieu because it's Havana in the early 60s, so it is saturated in the political realm. But it's it comes out in 68, so it has that. In no offense to my colleague, if there was like one word in that kind of chronology that seemed whatever, off the wall. So my apologies to that. But I was just doing it in a general way, most certainly. So anyway, that I would say that had the most profound effect on me for a first time ever seen film since 2011's Tree of Life. So it's taken about 7 years to see a really good new film, even though it was from 68. Because everything else, it's just kind of like the same old thing over and over and over again. Even though these films are taken in with discretion, so it's not like the Wild West, see anything, because that's not going to happen. So there's always you're always batting about 900 when you do your homework. So 9 out of 10, and if you do see a film that is not up to speed, it's usually for an academic reason that no matter how bad it is, you had to see it anyway. But yeah, Memories of Underdevelopment, just like Symbiopsychotoxoplasm, take one. That's what I'm completely down with, along with Andrei Rublev and The Cranes Are Flying. Those to me are the epitome of cinema, obviously with Hour of the Wolf and all of that as well, and David Holzman's diary. Also, The Passion of Joan of Arc, Carl Theodor Dreyer. I've seen that throughout the ages, but to see it up on the big screen was totally a delight. So, in 1 month, North by Northwest, The Passion of Joan of Arc, and Memories of Underdevelopment on the big screen, probably in my half century of life, I'd be hard pressed to think that no other month in my half century of living did I see 3 of the top films ever in 1 month on the big screen. So that would be it. Passion of Joan of Arc, North by Northwest, and Memories of Underdevelopment. And Gabe, thank you for your patience, most certainly. I did also see Can Man, about the Cannes Film Festival. Totally my style of film, because it involves lots of, kind of like, real people in, obviously situated situations, but nonetheless there's a certain delight in that, because to me, like I say, like when that lady is talking to the guy to the cameraman in David Holzman's diary, that to me is better than any acting in the world. I just don't get into narrative films like I do experimental films from a certain era. Just like in, I think when they did that play within one of Brian De Palma's films, Greetings or Hi Mom, and one of my friends that actually saw it with me, and he was duly impressed because it was real, and the actors in it were like freaking out too while they were being filmed in this play. So or not a play, but this live theater event. Was very, very cool. And if you do want to see a pretty cool thing involving a hybrid of cinema and theater, is Dionysus in '69 by Brian De Palma. Because once you mention Brian De Palma, for the most part, you have this populist notion of 73 Sisters on up as to what Brian De Palma is. But he was actually an experimental filmmaker in the '60s and did 6 of them. And 4 out of 6 are worthy, which is Greetings, Hi Mom, Dionysus in '69, and Murder a la Mode. The other 2, Get to Know Your Rabbit, and what is it, The Wedding or something like that, is negligible. So anyway, and then falling asleep, I have had it with the 7 Keys to Baldpate. It's an odd name, but I think I must have listened to that a couple dozen times or more, trying to get to sleep. And then the kicker is, when I finally do make it to the end after a number of weeks, there is no end because the recording cuts off. But it's all in good fun. I came upon the 7 Keys to Baldpate from a 16 millimeter screening a number of weeks ago, and it was just a delight about a writer who had to come up with a story on a bet within 24 hours in a storm-drenched mansion. And so me and my colleague went downtown to the downtown library, and not to get that play, but to get something for another project. And I just was going through the plays, and all of a sudden, a little brown book, 7 Keys to Baldpate. I was happier than heck. Gabe, just give me a minute, my man. So then also checked out Mark Bolan's Born to Boogie. It's Mark Bolan in concert, and some silly, inept film junk Ringo Starr directed. Just kind of like silly stuff put in, kind of like maybe like the Monkees or something along. It would be an analogy. But anyway, what's good about that is because it's actually helpful to see him play. It's very primitive, his playing. He's only using a couple locations on the fretboard, at the top of the fretboard and at the bottom of the fretboard. It's pretty modulated. It's just, back and forth, between those 2 regions, very small pockets on the fretboard. But it's, he has this kind of like jungle rhythm going, and people are going. It's very primitive what he's doing. And it's interesting because it's basic, and it's like basic musicianship. So that's interesting to see instead of all this complicated stuff, Johnny Winter flying over the fretboard or something like that. You can't make heads or tails of it. So, but in this sense, in this very reductive, essential sense, this very primitive sense, you can see what he's doing, and he, like I said, he has that primordial beat going on too, which is interesting. Definitely how that's all handled. Okay, I've said my piece, man. And we go to Mr. Van Handel. How you doing, my man?
Oh, Mark, life just goes on, and it's great. Oh man, we took last week off, and it was much needed. I was really glad, Mark, that you requested we take off. I was in the middle of a move, and was in the middle of sorting through another person's life in terms of their belongings, and we were figuring out what stays, what goes, what gets thrown away, what gets put in storage, and there's a lot of emotion. There's just a lot of life there. There's a lot of death there. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of.
Are you talking about in your storage thing? That sounds pretty deep.
No, it's not my stuff. It's someone else's stuff. But it's like you're watching this play unfold, and some of it's on the surface, some of it's spoken, some of it's unspoken, some of it's real, some of it's imagined, and but it's all happening, whether it's physical or whether it's imagined. moving is one of the stranger dramas of one's life, and there's a lot you learn about people. There's a lot you see about people, and you see a lot, and to some, it's this laborious, horrible, physically tolling task that you have to undertake. That is just this monotonous thing that doesn't mean anything. It's just this thing that has to be done, and when it's over, and you'll never have to think about it again. Besides, when in reference to a move, when a coworker brings up having to move, you think, oh yeah, moving, that's horrible. I hate moving. You have this like vague memory that's in the storage bin of the moving memories, and it doesn't have to be that way. There are all these small moments with people, these little conversations you can have, and that doesn't mean that they're boring conversations. It just means that they sort of fall into this rhythm of the hard work conversation, where your bonds can really be tested with the people you care about, the people you love, the people, in many cases, people you don't even know, or people that you think you know. And the nature of those relationships can change during a move. They can deepen, they can break. Because when people are put under pressure, especially physical pressure, it's kind of like alcohol. Sometimes their personality changes, whether it's a revealing of their real personality or of just a darkening of their personality, or it's just a side of them that is really, an important part of who they are, but it only comes out very, very infrequently. So it's always interesting to see people under pressure and under strain, under duress, and how they react, how they treat each other, how they talk, and ultimately what their behavior ends up.
You were part of an anthropological experiment.
Oh, absolutely. Well, at the end of the day, it's your behavior. It's not your words. And, it's what you do. It's not what you said you're going to do. It's not what you wanted to do. It's what you do. It's how you actually treat other people and how you honor commitments and how you, and so it's all that kind of stuff. So
it's all part of the struggle, my man.
Yeah, I always find moving really interesting. So, needless to say, it was very interesting and very rewarding, and it's, I've come out on the other side of it.
Alive.
Better for it.
Okay.
Stronger, better, wiser.
My man, it sounds like you could almost write a memoir about it.
Well, you never know. But Mark, yeah, it's been 2 weeks of movies. I don't think I watched a film for a week there. I think like every night was so devoted to packing, unpacking, moving, shipping, transporting, unloading, that there just wasn't time. But now things have finally settled down. So I did get around to watching I had numerous just full-on movie days. So in that interim, between our shows 2 weeks ago, Mr. Majestic, which is a very average Charles Bronson thriller from 1972, among many films that Bronson made in 72. Just another classic, shotgun classic from that period. Michael Winner, J. Lee Cobb, and numerous other directors that fell into his good graces that really created a rhythm of action cinema that, if you're a fan of that kind of stuff, Mr. Majestic is just one of about 20 or 25 films that Bronson was in that fall into that milieu, but definitely not works of art. My Friend Dahmer, which is a contemporary film I've been wanting to see for about 6 months, and I finally got around to that. It's based on a popular graphic novel that is written by an illustrator who was sort of friends with Jeffrey Dahmer when he was in high school with him. And it's one of those films that has a very interesting narrative idea, but just only has about 2 or 3 minutes of interesting execution that I would say would fall into almost the non-linear or the non-expected. But it's an intelligently scripted, intelligently acted, intelligently directed, really forthright, really direct, and really honest film. And it looks I wouldn't say compassionately, but it looks at Jeffrey Dahmer as a human being. It doesn't just look at him as this serial killer exhibit, or like something to be gawked at, or something to be horrified by, or something to put on just something to read out of the Encyclopedia of Serial Killers. Interesting film. Definitely one of the better independent films, more on the mainstream independent side of films that came out last year. It's engrossing, it's engaging, it's entertaining. It's not a standard coming-of-age film, which is odd because it kind of falls into that territory at times because the protagonist is Jeffrey Dahmer. But it's inviting, it's involving, it's fun, and you forget at times that you're watching Jeffrey Dahmer, and then when you remember, that's when the film is most successful. Is that blurring that invisible line where you're sort of watching it from this anthropological point of view of knowing that this character is Jeffrey Dahmer and then forgetting about it. That crossover is very well done, but not a very surprising or unexpected film. But it falls into that territory, Mark, of what you're talking about. Like, even very good films sort of fall into this territory of just like, it's just the same thing. This film is no exception. It falls into that territory of unusual biopic about a sort of culty topic. So definitely for people that have enjoyed other films about Jeffrey Dahmer, which there have been quite a few that I would say fall more into the realm of unusual, less expected cinema. Dahmer from 2002 is actually shockingly good, which, considering that it was a straight-to-video thriller that was paired up with numerous other straight-to-video thrillers about other serial killers, all of which were just expectedly bad. Dahmer, there was like the film Gacy, there was Bundy, I think there was another one, and Dahmer, which you would have expected would fall into the same category of just a disposable straight-to-video thriller, was actually an exceptional film, and was a breakout performance for Jeremy Renner, which actually is what got him the role in The Hurt Locker when Catherine Bigelow saw that film. And also, our colleagues made a film, Jeff, numerous years ago that they later retitled The Jeffrey Dahmer Files, which is an exquisite documentary that has certain reenactment scenes that are very tastefully done, that have, of course, Andrew Swant, of our good friends, and of our good colleagues, Bobby Ciraldo and Andrew Swant. And Andrew Swant is a brilliant presence in that film as Jeffrey Dahmer. He's always been very self-effacing about his performance in that film, but not to be believed. That film is exceptional. That film is brilliant, and good stuff on that front. But yeah, My Friend Dahmer, really entertaining stuff, but nothing too out of the box. Nothing too outside of the box in that one. Finally got around to seeing 3:10 to Yuma. I've seen half of it twice before. I rented it back in 2008 when it came out in video, and twice tried to watch it and fell asleep both times. But I'm glad I powered through it this time. It's an exceptional thriller. It's an exceptional Western. It's got some of Christian Bale's best acting. It's a remake of a 1950s Western, and it's hinged on the premise of a cowardly farmer who's barely trying to hold his family together and hold on to the land that he's losing to a land baron, and basically hold a man at gunpoint and get him on a train so he can collect a bounty on him. And it's just one awful predicament after another. Film's loaded with brilliant action scenes, great acting, terrific suspense. It was made during this period when Lionsgate was still making exceptional films in that period, in that space between the indie and the indie mainstream. And they were, I'd say, about 50% of the films that they were putting out from about 2003 to about 2009 were just absolutely exceptional. And this falls in that category of a smarter mainstream film. So if you're a fan of Westerns and you have not seen that, I highly recommend that. That's available for streaming on Amazon Prime. As promised to our friend Lou from New York, I am continuing to finish and try and watch every film that Clint Eastwood has ever directed, and I have knocked a couple more titles off my Eastwood list. So White Hunter, Black Heart, finally got seen. I've wanted to see this movie since I was 5 years old. First and foremost, its VHS cover is one of the most mysterious in the Eastwood catalog. It's almost impossible to decipher from a child's point of view, but it's a large, blown-up grainy, almost like overexposed shot of Eastwood, what seems to be him touching his lips, but upon further investigation, after seeing the film, it's clearly a blown-up close-up of him smoking a cigar, and his hand happens to be gracing his lips. In the background, there's a shot of an elephant rearing its trunk up. It's a dramatization of a book that is a novelization of a man's experience, and it was written by a member of the crew, of the experience of the film The African Queen being made. The novel White Hunter Black Heart, which was adapted into this film, was a novelization of John Huston basically being more obsessed with hunting an elephant and with drinking and being absurd than with actually getting The African Queen made. There's notable and notorious on-set problems that befell that film. That was, in its time, that was one of the most, in the Hollywood lore canon, that was one of the most almost disastrous films. I mean, there's a lot of them nowadays after, especially the quantity of films that have been made over the decades, but the destruction of the set on Robert Altman's Popeye in 1980, large numbers of other films where their sets have been destroyed, where their shooting locations have fallen out from under them, where disease and plague, definitely Werner Herzog's experience making Fitzcarraldo falls right into that category of just one obstacle after another. But Eastwood does a great job playing John Huston. It's probably the best acting role he's ever undertaken. It's unusual, and like Eastwood's best films as a director, he emasculates himself in an interesting way. In every single film he directs, he does this. He finds something really inherently awful or something weak or something broken. He finds something truly unmasculine and really, in some cases, degenerate or against type, and he really exposes it as one of the core weaknesses of this character's full identity, of why this person really is not, why a character is so desperate to prove his masculinity, and ultimately where that failing, where that overexertion of manhood and alphadom comes from. That's really the central core, the key to Eastwood's films as a director. After re-examining and watching titles that I'd never gotten around to, that's easily the most obvious concurrent themes in his films are the broken nature, the sense of loss that Eastwood imbues in his, on a single level, alpha main characters, whether he's in those films or not. It's really tenderness and it's really frailty that he has such a genius for conveying, especially while surrounded by such embittered and classically fraught, almost like 1950s style of the machismo American rugged individual. Which, considering that Eastwood was nurtured as a filmmaker by Don Siegel and was impressed upon by the cinema of Howard Hawks, it's obvious that those are the types of films that he would want to direct, that those are the types of core storylines. But the fact that he is always more interested in the character's failings, I've always found that interesting about his films. And after seeing more of them, it becomes more obvious that really is that strength as a narrative filmmaker. So White Hunter Black Heart is no exception to that. A rather bad film, I'd say probably the worst film that Eastwood ever directed besides Jersey Boys, Firefox from 1982, which is still a ridiculously entertaining film about Eastwood infiltrating the USSR to steal a thought-controlled super fighter jet, which suffers from just amazingly bad special effects, amazingly poor set design, lapses of logic that are just, I think, would be apparent even to an 8-year-old watching this film. And as much as I would previously have said that the Iger Sanction is the stupidest film that Eastwood ever made, it has to go to Firefox. It's just unbelievably inept in its filmmaking, in its logic, in its just its fixation on its own narrative, which is so boring and is so one-dimensional. I was just baffled at the fact that this film was not chopped to like 3/4 of its initial running length. But at the same time, there is something really watchable about the film. There's something always going on. As stupid as the film is underneath it, the film itself has this sort of weirdly nostalgic value to it, and has this time capsule quality, which I found very intriguing. So looking at a film and this very like one-dimensional view of what the Soviet Union was like, made from the perspective of Eastwood from '82, that was very interesting. But that ultimately had nothing to do with the bad action film that I was watching on the screen. So I finally got around to watching 10 Cloverfield Lane, which was the semi-sequel to Cloverfield that came out 3 years ago now. And it's a really impressive thriller. It takes place in a small, confined space. It's a brilliant horror film. It's a brilliant science fiction film. It's wonderfully acted. I don't think that there's too many people I would convince to watch it who haven't seen it. And I don't think anyone who has seen it, I could probably convince that it's a bad film. So it's a strong entry in the PG-13 sci-fi canon, and it probably has the best performance I've ever seen John Goodman give. Just layered, nuanced, brilliant, and unpredictable. A really, really top-notch thriller. I was really impressed with that film. I went to the theater and saw two films. I saw Annihilation, which has had a mixed critical response. Natalie Portman stars, and as does Jennifer Jason Leigh and Oscar Isaacs, in a film about a group of women who are scientists who venture into this phenomenon known as the shimmer. And it is an ethereal sort of postmodern science fiction film directed by the man who made Ex Machina, which is one of the better science fiction films of the last 20 years. Many people, many film aficionados called it the best film of 2015, which I would not argue with for even a second. I would say, many people would say, just like many people said Sicario for 2014, I wouldn't necessarily pick that first, but if anyone who did pick that, I would say that that's a strong contender, just because of the conviction and the artistry underneath the mainstream artifices of the film. And I would say that Ex Machina was no different. So his sophomore film is sophomoric. It's very pretentious. It's very boring at stretches. It's very full of lead up to prove something that I think started at in the first film. And I think there's almost this need or desire to be even more Kubrickian with this film. Small cast, small settings, but utilizing some of those big budget, big film, big studio resources. So there's some, very, very handsome looking special effects and very, very unnerving scenes with creatures from another, I would say from another dimension, from outer space. It's not quite really known what the nature of the lurking evil in this film is. And it plays that theme up pretty well, because it doesn't ever fully explain what's going on, and there are long stretches of total surreal. I don't want to say nonsense, but just over the top surreal. There's just over the top surrealism for long stretches that are not explained, and that's either going to drive you nuts if you need answers. But for people who like questions and people who don't need their cinema to be wrapped in a bow and don't need films to be more like TV shows where there's a reason for all the actions and a plot to have to explain the motivations of why we're watching something that's beautiful, the film lingers on things that are just beautiful and exquisite and mysterious and bizarre simply for the sake of lingering on things that are mysterious and bizarre. And I found that really refreshing, that it had more of an art film sensibility, considering that I was in an audience filled with mainstream American cinema, and there was the obligatory 5 or 6 walkouts.
Yes,
like
and I do want to add something lingering and bizarre, Tom, Pankowski wants to add to your list of serial killers the film Dahmer versus Gacy.
Thanks. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, that definitely is on that list. I've never seen that film, but I'm familiar with it. Yeah, that's definitely on that that straight-to-video bin. Oof. So Annihilation, I highly recommend it to film people. If you're not a person who likes to think about your films, who doesn't need answers from your films, and likes to watch movies that aren't wrapped up in a nice, neat American bow, I would highly recommend Annihilation. And even in that crowd, about half those people are not going to like that film. It's not a crowd pleaser. It is not a mainstream film. It is not. It's not the film it was advertised to be, which is going to upset a lot of people, because a lot of people are going to go to a film expecting a movie where Natalie Portman is walking around a large cacophony of special effects with a machine gun killing aliens. And that is so not the film that is presented on the screen. The level of discomfort in the theater, with the exception of a couple with older couples, these people that you can tell have read the reviews of the film that they're going to see, have, read about films as much as they watch films. You can only spot these people because they're quiet while they watch films in the theater. They're respectful. They watch the entire frame. They're aware of the nuances of editing, of cinematography, of music. They don't have these 2-minute attention spans. They aren't puzzled by puzzling moments in films. So it's always cool to see these older, respectful, intelligent couples that go to the mall to see a movie. Go see this mainstream film where you've got 2/3 of the audience is what the hell's going on here? This movie's horrible. And then, of course, the obligatory 6 walkouts, which, almost raises the bar of the quality of the film, in my opinion. Whenever you have people that walk out of an art film, I'm always okay, that is just proven the worth of this film a little bit more. Terrence Malick films always have the obligatory 5 walkouts. I don't care how small the screening is. If less than 4 people walk out of the film, it's almost like it was a weak Terrence Malick film. And Game Night, which is, just as mainstream and as... so I went to go see Game Night as well in the theater, which is about as mainstream and contrived and as, American and expected of a comedy as you can get. Some very funny jokes. It's just a typical gimmicky waste of time. Very fun, very engaging, but definitely nothing that you're going to learn from, nothing you're going to feel anything from, and nothing that you're going to... nothing that's going to enhance your life, but definitely an above-average comedy, if that's your kind of thing, is seeing a date night, going on date night with a date, watch movies about couples saying quirky things. It's very much in the style of The Hangover or any of these other above-average quirky comedies where absurd things happen to sort of straight-laced, upper-middle-class people. Funny, to say the least, but definitely not memorable. Which I don't know if that's really a criticism or not, but it's definitely, I just felt like I was wasting my life while I was watching it. Vigilante from 1983, starring Robert Forster and Fred Williamson. I'm starting to watch more Fred Williamson films. Fred Williamson was a football player from the 1960s who was called The Hammer, and he was just there's no other word for him. And when he launched into a career in films, as did Woody Strode and several other, Jim Brown, who also starred in numerous blaxploitation films. He oftentimes played a vigilante or a cop or and he would be in these sort of blaxploitation films where just the standard vigilante thriller, kids killed, or just something in that vein where he had a score to settle. Black Caesar is probably the most famous film that he was ever in, from 1973. Very, very well-made exploitation film. That's, by the standards of blaxploitation, I would say that these are not films that would compete with art films from the 70s, but they're made on very low budgets and were made for a very specific black urban audience. So movies like Dolomite, The Mac, Black Caesar, Hell Comes to Harlem, Across 110th Street. These are films that exist on their own logic and their own terms and by their own rules. So they operate by different standards, and some of those films work better than others, but they definitely are of a time and a place. So very entertaining in their own right, and notable works of art for many, many reasons. And Vigilante is this interesting film because it's made in this very gritty 1983 way, which I don't know how else to really describe that look. But urban, low-budget, early 80s, movies like Class of 1980 would fall into that. There's numerous other like street films about high schoolers or degenerate youth, and just sort of street justice. And a lot of those films fall into the context of the pre-Death Wish 3 sort of look, which Death Wish 3 is the amalgamation of those, the cheapening and the ultra, like sort of like the ultra-don of all those ethos and mythos cheapened to their lowest common denominator value, but also blown up into its biggest grandiosity. I've talked about Death Wish 3 on the show numerous times. It's just one of those things that's just unbelievable. There's nothing quite like it. So Vigilante, I would say, is the more tasteful component of the lead up into that, of those Vigilante films. Shockingly, I'd actually never heard of it before until I ran across it in a book I'm reading right now called Theology, which is a book written by a film critic named Verne, which is a study of the ass-kicking films of Steven Seagal. That's the literal name of the book, and it is exactly what it says it is. And it ran across a section on the look, which is a moment in action films when characters give each other the look, when something terrible has happened to one character, the other character, both of which are men, the man comes back to character number two, who has previously offered the role as vigilante to character one. Character one does not live by those codes. Character one has something terrible happen to him. Usually his wife is shot or his child is killed. Character one comes back to character two and gives him the look, which implies, give me the shotgun, let's go. Rolling Thunder from 1977, one of the greatest action films of all time, also has the look in it. There's this great moment when Tommy Lee Jones is approached by character one. Character one just says, they killed my family. Character two, Tommy Lee Jones, says, I'll just go grab my things. He's in the middle of dinner, he's eating, he's got a suburban house and family, packs up a bag full of weapons, and he leaves without really explaining anything to his family other than, I get to go kill again. Like, everything about his family life is put on hold. He's a Vietnam vet with post-traumatic stress disorder, and the only thing that's going to give him any of the real relief that he needs is to go with his friend and seek vigilante justice. These are the tropes of action films. This is the logic of action films, and I love it. The Ten Commandments, directed by Cecil B. DeMille. I watched it. That's all I'm going to say about that. Crank 2, High Voltage. I watched it. I'm really glad I watched it. I've been hearing about it from people for 9 years since it came out in 2009, that it's one of the craziest, most over-the-top, most bombastic, and brilliantly bizarre action films ever made, and I agree with everything that everyone's ever said about it. It's got some of the most hypnotically... I don't even know. It's got some of the best editing, brain-melting editing I've ever seen in a film. It's some of the most consciously self-aware and self-deprecating fourth wall breaking moments I've ever seen in the film. It's a film that's tongue-in-cheek without overdoing the tongue-in-cheek factor too much. It's welcome. It's also repugnant and disgusting, but it's definitely a must for any action fans who never got around to it. Crank 2, High Voltage from 2009, one of the best action films that Lionsgate ever put out, one of the best films that Jason Statham has ever been in. I'd almost dare to say that the final product, in visual terms, verges on an art film just because it is so just bombastic and just Ritalin soaked. I don't know how else to describe it. Very enjoyable stuff. And that takes me to my last film, The Love Witch.
That's amazing.
2016.
Wow,
Yeah.
because that was just brought up, and yeah, I'm all ears, my man.
Well, Mark, I'm curious about your take on the Love Witch because
Then let me tell you. I saw her prior one. I believe it's called Viva, and it's a conceit. And once you are kind of like saturated with the conceit, it's like you still have to go through the rest of the film. And if I get this correct, it's in a very kind of like the lines in action are done in a very melodramatic, very stagey way, and
Yes.
it's
Yes.
and after you get that, you still have to keep getting it or be exposed to it for the rest of the film. But it's done very interesting. Like the Love Witch has this. I haven't. My memory eludes me. This 60s, 70s vibe, very colorful in a primordial way. And it has that 60s, 70s vibe, even though it takes place in contemporary times. It's a very interesting way of having kind of like two different worlds run parallel to each other. And I am done, sir.
Mark, I like everything that you touched on. There's a friend of mine that saw this film about a year ago and said, "This is the most unwatchable film I've ever seen. This is just, this is like."
Oh no! That would not be correct.
Thank you. And after I questioned this guy for a couple minutes, it became pretty obvious he's never seen a film from. He's never seen a cult or an exploitation film.
Yes, we did that. We could provide a list of unwatchable films.
Thank you. I watch them every week, and there's so many films from the late '60s and early '70s that have this sort of post-Technicolor look to them, where there's this period from about '67 to '73 in particular, where the stock in film changed a little bit. The way they shot films changed a little bit. The way that films were lit was changed significantly. And also the color palette in films due, of course, to a lot of it had to do with the counterculture being such an explosion of psychedelia in film, just exploding. That color in film and set pieces and decorations and costumes and cars and just the use of color was very different in movies between that period, and it became very standard for movies to use the color red, the color green, the color blue in a very different way than had ever been used prior. And when companies like Deluxe started processing film in a different way than Technicolor, Technicolor had that sort of imbued look to it, whereas Deluxe had this sort of muted but bold look to it at the same time. It went for a more photorealistic look. And when I say photorealistic, I mean the look of photographs that people took for their own photographs that they kept. It looked more like it was processed more it was processed in a more realistic way, where it did look closer to real life, but it still had a very shot on film look to it. And there was definitely you didn't have to light your films as much as you did with Technicolor, because Technicolor required just such an enormous amount of energy and such an enormous amount of output from your lights just to burn an image in all three of those reels of film. So there's a different look because there was a different type of lighting, and there was also just a different type of lighting scheme that was being used. So a movie like Bullet, I think, really nails down the difference between, if you look at films from the early 60s or even the late 50s, and then the types of films that are being shot in the late 60s, early 70s. Bullet, The Graduate, Bonnie and Clyde, very indicative of the type of new cinematography where things are much more casually lit, where there's less of these extreme shadows and there's more of these there's more subtlety in the colors. If you look in some of the interiors in Bonnie and Clyde, there's more layers to colors than I think most films prior to that, prior to 1965 have had. And by about 69, you have this easing, but there's all these other films. There's low-budget films that come out of this period that have that wild sense of color. And you have films about the counterculture that have this wild sense of color. Cactus Flower, Candy, films about hippies, films about drug freaks, films about cult leaders, films about sex slaves, and of course the exploitation films from that period as a means for making up their budgetary restrictions or lack of abundance. They, of course, just decorated everything. They filled the frame with as much exuberance and over-the-top qualities as possible. So a lot of low-budget films. The one that comes to mind the most is the Love Thrill Murders from 1971, which...
Oh, Gabe, is that... I've never even heard of that. My man, talk to us.
Oh, dude, it's a film that was re-released by Troma Films years later.
Okay.
And it's
under a different title.
It has, just all the elements of a film from that era. It's about a love cult that kidnaps and murders girls for to appease their pagan god. And it's all about this girl in San Francisco who's on her own and gets abducted into this drugs and sex cult, and she ultimately has to end up killing her best friend to appease this cult.
Right.
Lots of footage of hippies riding around on motorcycles in the streets of San Francisco. There's
what's the title?
It's called the Love Thrill Murders. There's this like prog rocky, psychedelic, like folk rocky soundtrack. It's like there's like barely any filmmaking in the movie.
Right.
It's great.
Yeah. Actually, I may have heard. I shouldn't say that I've never heard of it because that's probably ostensibly not true. But you have dutifully reminded me, for which I dutifully thank you.
The Love Witch has so many similarities to so many films from that era, but the Love Thrill Murders in super specific. I was just overjoyed to watch a movie like The Love Witch, where every minute of it is just saturated with entertainment. And whether or not you like exploitation films from the late 60s, early 70s, and the way those are shot, there's so many references to those movies. So for people that are, it's a lot of fun just to watch the way that it's being reenacted in this contemporary sense, and it's shot on this crisp digital. So it's a different type of exploitation look, but it's decorated impeccably, seamlessly, just like a film from that era. The acting is it's intentional bad acting. So it's this real stagey, over-the-top, melodramatic quality. But the thing about it is that it has this real intelligent subtext to it, and it has this real intelligent plot about a woman who is seeking her independence and her own sexual independence, but she's really the cause of her own unhappiness because through trying to constantly assert that independence, she's constantly she's destroying what she's actually looking for. So what she thinks in her mind, she thinks she wants is to be an independent woman who doesn't need a man, who doesn't need anybody, who is, she's striving for these extreme versions of feminism, of second wave and third wave feminism, and all the power to her for that. But in reality, what her character clearly wants, and it's much to her behest, is that the fact that she wants a traditional life in terms of the patriarchal, male-dominated society of the 50s and pre-1950s. She actually has a desire for this American patriarchal marriage life, but in her mind, because of this terrible event that's befallen her in her past, she's convinced that she doesn't want that and is basically fighting herself and rebelling against herself. So there's this contrast between her psyche, and of course there's all this pagan ritualism throughout the film, and her battle with her desires, both sexual and physical, mental, emotional, and of course with society itself. And the fact that it's made in this very direct, very simple, I wouldn't say simple, but very linear means of having an overdubbed narration and having characters that speak in very direct dialogue, stagey dialogue to each other, the intentions and the ideas of what's the subconscious, of what's subconscious and what's conscious, what's staged and what's meant to be surrealist and what's sort of meant to be ethereal is all very clear, but it still blurs together beautifully, and it's a wonderfully entertaining and still thoughtful and intelligent film.
So see Viva before that.
Oh, Diva from
No.
81?
Diva. Well, Diva is a great film as well from France. But I mean, talk about. I think it's Viva prior to the Love Witch with that same stylization.
Yep. Yeah, Viva is been on my list, but I haven't gotten around to it. So yeah, super cool stuff there. It's been a busy week. You know what? I will talk about the Ten Commandments just for 1 minute because I know we got to go. The Ten Commandments is the biggest example of that big, bold 1950s Technicolor look that you could ever get. I don't think that there is a better example of just the pointless bombast of that Technicolor saturated look. That movie, if you haven't seen it, is really something. It's 3 hours and 40 minutes, and it doesn't have a tasteful minute in it, but man, is it entertaining. I just never got around to watching it, never had to watch it. It was never an Easter staple in my house. But, there's a lot of competency and a lot of idiocy put together in that film and a lot of money. It's like the most expensive film ever made when it came out, and it shows. There's some staggering, beautiful images, but man, is that film just as dumb as it gets. Obvious, mainstream, pandering, one-dimensional, just as obvious as big-budget mainstream films get. But there's a sort of intention behind it, and that the tackiness and really the silliness and the stupidity of that mission is so resolute that it actually is a total success in this other sort of dimension. So I'd say just for anthropological purposes, if you haven't seen the Ten Commandments and you've ever had an inkling to, get it out of the way. You've got nothing to lose. Every minute of that film, there's something just morbidly awful going on in terms of what not to do if you're making a film.
Excellent.
Yeah. Mark, that's all I got, man.
Okay, well, thank you, Gabe, and that was a lot, and I really do appreciate it because, again, you covered the spectrum quite well. Gabe, I just wish you the best of all evenings. Get good sleep, eat well, keep just living the life that you live, my man.
Mark, likewise to all our listeners, live the dream. We'll see you all soon.
Good night, my man.
Good night.
So excellent, Gabe Van Handel. I really appreciate it. It's very cozy. It's like a sitting next to a very cozy fireplace, and can't do it without him because there's just no way, man, I could be rolling with a show for an hour without having some serious preparation. And Gabe does it quite well extemporaneously, so that's too cool. So anyway. What a wonderful life it is if you know how to live it, man. And, man, I always say I'm going to look forward to some serious sleep early, but then all of a sudden you start reading and time gets on, but I can't, got to exert some self-control in this matter because I really, really, really need some sleep. And while Gabe was regaling us in the glories of cinema, I was looking up some radio dramas, so I might so I was looking up like CBC, Midnight, Nightfall, and Vanishing Point, which Midnight and Nightfall I used to listen to in the early 80s when they came out. So it is going to be cool to, I think it's going to be Nightfall that I'll be falling asleep to, and I'm looking at those episodes. So, listeners, thank you for listening, and yeah, I would not let the days go by, man. Just follow your dreams for sure. And that's not esoteric. I mean, dreams are built like houses, man, one brick at a time, and all of a sudden, voila. We will be on at the same time next week on WXR WLP 104.1 FM Milwaukee. To hear past episodes, visit riverwestradio.com/shows and click Cinema Fireside.